Now let's look at the father-son relationship. All law is based on a father-son relationship. The legal term is parens patriae, meaning parent of the country. The parens patriae document has its roots in English common law. In feudal times, various obligations and powers, collectively referred to as the royal prerogative, were reserved to the king. The king exercised these functions in the role as father of the country. Who's your daddy? Gotta know who's your daddy. Let's look at a fiction of law. What is a fiction of law? A convenient fiction or a misfortunate truth? Fiction means feigned, imaginary, not real. The human persons are as fictitious as the airy ones. This was written about 100 years ago. You won't find this now. Feign. To invent or imagine, to form an idea or conception of something not real. To make a show of, to pretend, to assume a false appearance, to counterfeit, to represent falsely, to pretend, invent, devised, imagine, assumed. This is nothing more than fraud. But you're the one that's doing it. No one's forcing you to do it. So it's not a fraud then, is it? But it's fraud. You're being tricked into committing fraud. Now here's man's justification or rationale for this, but it doesn't answer why. I'm just going to read you some things about fiction of law here. It says, fiction of law, or fictions were invented, fictions were invented by the Roman praetors, who, not possessing the power to abrogate the law, were nevertheless willing to derogate from it under the pretense of doing equity. Abrogate means to get rid of. So not possessing the power to get rid of the law, what law are we talking about here? What law couldn't they get rid of? This was the Roman Empire. Controlled the whole world. What law couldn't they get rid of? Think about it. And they did this under the pretense of doing equity. Pretense means pretending with the intention to deceive. It goes on to say that a fiction of law is the assumption that a certain thing is true, and which gives to a person or a thing a quality which is not natural to it, and establishes consequently a certain disposition, which, without the fiction, would be repugnant to reason and truth. It is an order of things which does not exist, but which the law prescribes or authorizes. Fictions of law owe their origin to the legislative usurpation of the bench. The legislative usurpation of the bench. So somebody usurped the bench, sat on it, and started making laws. The usurpation of whose bench? And then it goes on to say that the law abounds in fictions. Apparently thousands of them. See, a fiction of law is like this. I make a contract with somebody. I make some obligations, some agreements, some promises, and they make some agreements and promises back to me, so I get some consideration for a contract. I'm not going to do something for nothing. Except we impose a fiction of law to create the contract, the agreement. There's nobody there. We just pull it out of thin air. It's a pretend person, just so that I can get what I want under this contract or agreement. This is in the Canadian Law Dictionary. Fiction, a rule of law which assumes something which is false is true and will not allow it to be disproved. So if you ever think truth is in law, it's not. An assumption by law that something is false is true. A statute may state that X is to be treated as Y. And that's a rule of law. I don't think so. Realistic fiction. Did you know there's such a thing as a realistic fiction? Realistic fiction strives to make the reader feel as if they're reading something that is actually happening, something that, though not real, is described in a believable way that helps the reader make a picture as if it were an actual event. This can also confuse the reader into making the reader think it's nonfiction. So it says that the law abounds in fictions. Really? It does not exist in nature. Fictions, it said, this thing does not exist in nature. Well, the supernatural doesn't exist in nature either. Do you think our law abounds in the supernatural, the occult, witchcraft, necromancy? It's all supernatural. Anything that produces an unnatural effect is witchcraft. That's what witchcraft is. So for the trick to work, you have to be an unwitting accomplice. If you knew you were doing this, you would know it's a fraud. Also, the trick would have no value unless someone brings to life the fiction. Brings to life the fiction, or brings to life the dead. Also, people would ask, why do I have to do this? Can we not just be who we are? The answer is no. Those that know would have to tell you the truth about the law and could never take advantage of you.